totally. It's so interesting. As we're talking about the Trinity and we're talking about the 3 in 1, but really right now we're kind of just talking about the Father and Jesus.
Yes.
Is what I'm noticing. And I actually think that that's one of the things that makes the Trinity really hard to understand as a churchgoer, as a Christian, is that we don't actually talk about the Holy Spirit that much. And so I kind of want to.
No, that's a good call.
Right now is like we say we're talking about the Trinity, but we haven't talked about the Spirit much.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. No, and it is an interesting thing because the Spirit is the more the active member of the personhood of the Trinity.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And what we would say is that the Spirit is the one that, like, as you read in Galatians 4, is the one that calls us to call Abba Father. Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah. And we say in Galatians, like, the fruits of the Spirit. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's a good point, Kenna, because I think I have almost seen the Holy Spirit as subservient to the other two.
Yes.
Right.
Like the Holy Spirit's like, because Jesus describes him as the helper, and you're like, oh, that's cute. Like the Holy Spirit.
It's your buddy.
He's just my buddy. And
oh boy.
The Holy Spirit, like, I think for a long time I've conceptualized him as just this force that, like, I feel when I worship, that, like, I experience when I'm passionate about God, or like he pops things into my head that help me a little bit, and
as buddies do.
I love
the way you're talking about this.
And he
slash
what I think is slash she.
Yes, no, that's right. That's about right. That's right.
That the Holy Spirit, we often talk about in the church as only being around after Jesus left. That is a narrative that we have very often. Like the Holy Spirit became real when it entered the story in Acts. Like that's the new form of God now.
Yeah.
And the reality is that's not true. It's actually kind of heresy.
Yes.
Like the reality is the Holy Spirit has always been God.
Yes.
And always existed as God. I mean, from page 1, the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. So like the Holy Spirit has always been there.
Yes.
Now has our relationship with the Holy Spirit changed since Jesus? Like, yes.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that he didn't exist. And I think that sometimes we talk about him that way.
And even his functionality, if we can say it that way, was the same. Like when it was the thing that dwelt personally. Like when David prays, take not thy Holy Spirit from me. Like that doesn't really make that much sense if David didn't have the Holy Spirit. I think in the Christian tradition, we also think like, oh no, like those poor Jews, they didn't have the Holy Spirit because Pentecost hadn't happened yet. No, like the Spirit was active and working. What we say is at Pentecost that the place of dwelling of God's Spirit left the Holy of Holies and now is the human heart.
Would you say that Jesus as a human experienced relationship with the Holy Spirit in the same way that we would experience a relationship with the Holy Spirit as humans?
Absolutely. Yes.
I think that is really helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So yes, because like if you read right after, yes, no, this is right. That's exactly right.
Because that's in John 17.
John 17. It is also like after Jesus was baptized, who led him into the desert?
Right.
The Holy Spirit. Yes, the Spirit of God.
Right? The Spirit is the thing that leads. And I actually think it is appropriate to say the Holy Spirit as she. Pneuma is the word in Greek, and it does have a neutral to feminine like meaning. Like Holy Spirit like is the guider, the one that is active and moving, reminding human beings of the love revealed in Jesus, reminding them that Jesus is the one that reminding them to call out to Abba Father. Yeah.
So I think that we've kind of touched on this idea that sometimes it's easy to think of the three persons as like hierarchical, like God the Father, and then out of that is God the Son, and then out of that is Holy Spirit. But I think that maybe the reason why we do that is because of what you're describing, that the Holy Spirit is what leads us to Jesus the Son, who reveals, because God says Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so there's that, we cannot understand God the Father except through Jesus the Son. So it's not that there's a level of hierarchy as far as like power or authority or spirituality, but there is a level like of
relationship,
like revelation through each other and through each person that is in a particular order.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and like even Jesus says, I and the Father are one, which is like mind-boggling still.
Because, and here's what I want, I think this is the important thing, just to like really try to get into the heart of this to the degree that we can, is that what we're saying is that one, the Trinity shows us a type of love, a non-dependent, ever-giving, gracious form of love. It lets us an other outsourced love out of abundance. That's the type of love. It's not a self-serving love, right? So that's number one. Two, it helps us understand community. That this, and a community is not hierarchical in the sense that we think about it. Otherwise, it's like that's like a political order. This is like a community as was shown to us in, like, let's say Acts 2, one that was like devoting themselves, sharing everything that they had in common, learning from one another. And that is also revealed in the Trinity, that there is a community of things that are happening. And from the beginning to the end, and we are invited into that community. And as someone that is experiencing the community of God's ever-flowing love and Holy Spirit, Father-Son relationship, we too, as every one of us has the Holy Spirit living in us, experiencing the love of that God, getting to then do that with one another in the ways that we are experiencing in the Trinity of God. So it would make sense. Doesn't it just absolutely make sense that if God is Trinity, the first thing that God does is create a community? Like it makes sense then that the first thing isn't then people like forcing people into submission, right? That would we get if we got one God making us serve. No, it creates a community of self-giving, loving, self-sacrificing presence in the world. That's why that makes sense. So, which I just think is incredible.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, like it, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you can stay tuned for all of our content.